Bangladesh's president has dissolved parliament, clearing the way for new elections to replace the longtime prime minister who resigned and fled the country to India yesterday. The political chaos all follows weeks of demonstrations against her rule that descended into violence. Manisa Denabalan joins us live with more on this. Manisa, after all of the unrest, how are things looking today?
Nicole, the streets seemed calmer today, and late this afternoon, the country announced that Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus will oversee the interim government, which is something that student protesters were calling for. The streets of Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, were quieter today, with no reports of new violence after days of unrest. Video shows hundreds of protesters who took over the chamber of Bangladesh's parliament building yesterday. The country has been engulfed by demonstrations and violence after student protests last month against quotas that reserved a high portion of government jobs for certain groups escalated into a campaign to oust PM Sheikh Hasina. A massive crowd stormed Hasina's official residence yesterday. Some were breaking things, while others were seen looting. During her time, Hasina received credit for the country's economic turnaround, but she's also been heavily criticized.
There was significant corruption, mismanagement of public resources, and partisan distribution of social welfare protections.
There needs to be a rebuilding of independent institutions. There needs to be better human rights protections. There needs to be workers whose labor rights have to be protected. Street children who have to be protected. I mean, there are so many communities that deserve social justice and welfare, and this is the time for Bangladesh to move forward in those directions.
Earlier today, the president cleared the way for new elections by dissolving parliament. As the country waited for a new government to emerge, a key student leader said protesters wanted Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus to head an interim government.
We have given our blood. We have been martyred. Our vision of forming a new Bangladesh will now have to be realized.
The president's press secretary made the announcement that Yunus will head the country's interim government late this afternoon after a meeting that lasted more than 5 hours. Known as the banker to the poorest of the poor and a longtime critic of Hasina, Yunus will act as a caretaker premier until new elections are held. Meanwhile, across the border, India held an all-party meeting today on the crisis. The country's foreign minister saying they remain deeply concerned until law and order is visibly restored.
Our border guarding forces have also been instructed to be exceptionally alert in view of this complex situation.
And the UN urged calm and restraint by all sides.
The Secretary General stands in full solidarity with the people of Bangladesh and calls for the full respect of their human rights. He continues to underscore the need for a full, independent, impartial, and transparent investigation into all acts of violence.
Today, the president also ordered the release of the opposition leader from house arrest. About 300 people were killed and thousands were injured in the violence that ripped through the country since July. But what will happen next with the interim government and when will the next election be held? We'll have to wait and see.